Hello, I'm Emma Carroll. I'm the author of books for young people, including this one, which you may have heard of, called Letters from the Lighthouse, and its sequel story, which is in this collection called When We Were Warriors. But the book I'm going to be talking to you about today, and I'm very excited about, is my newest book called The Week at World's End. Now, there's quite a few reasons why I'm rather excited about this book. One of which is because it's a hardback. Now, I haven't had a book published in hardback before, so this is quite exciting. And can we just take a moment, please, to appreciate the beauty of the edition that my publishers have created. It is it's just lovely. We've got, first of all, a new cover illustrator on board, a lady called Daniela Terrazzini, who has done these glorious images. And if we look on the back there, look at that back cover, gorgeous. Inside the book, we have these lovely end papers that just look really gorgeous. And we've also got little chapter headings, little designs there, look. So we've got some lovely artwork going on in this book. Sorry, that sounds a bit nerdy, doesn't it? But I just love it. I just hope the insides live up to it, quite honestly. But what Danielle's also done is she started redesigning the covers for my backlist as well. So we've got a new cover for When We Were Warriors, if I can show you that there, and for Somerset Tsunami, and for my debut book, Frost Hollow Hall. So all of those new covers should be out in the shops as well. So I really hope you see those and think, there's a new cover, that looks great. So so that's all good. The other reason we've come out in hardback is because it gives us two goes at kind of talking to you about the book, if you like. So the hardback is the first book to come out, and then the paperback will be coming out in March, and we get to talk to you again about this story later in the year. It's, like I say, it's exciting for me because I haven't had a big book out for a while. And this book was kind of held up a little bit by COVID. It was also held up a bit by me being, what can I say? It was hard work writing this book. Some books come relatively easily. Not very many, admittedly, but sometimes, the story comes together quite quickly and there's a lot to say and you're off on an adventure and it kind of, it's all there. And sometimes a book takes a while to sort of grow in your imagination. And this book took a while to grow in my imagination. And it's interesting because when you look at the end result of a book like that, I don't think it's obvious to the reader at all what's gone on as a writer. And Letters from a Lighthouse actually was another one that took a while for me to kind of to come together. But I'm really kind of attached, I guess, is a word you could use. I think it's a book of the heart for me. This book, they all are, to be honest, but this one feels like it is because it's the most modern of my books. It's set in 1962, but I also use a lot of my own family history in this story. Not least the fact that I interviewed my mum and dad, or grilled, should I say, my mum and dad quite a lot for the writing of this story, because they were teenagers in 1962 when my story is set. Believe it or not, I actually wasn't alive then. I know that might be hard to believe, but I wasn't. And their accounts of what happened during this particular time in history really gave me the sort of seeds for writing the story. So the book is set, like I say, in 1962, and it's set during a week where the world was on the brink of nuclear war. Now, that's not a made-up thing. That actually did happen. It was called the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it was where America and Russia came to blows, or almost came to blows, over the positioning of missiles on the island of Cuba. Now, Cuba is a communist country and was sort of allies with the Russians. And Cuba is also very close to the coast of Florida. So you've got this situation where you've got Russian weapons, or Russian, supported weapons very close to the coast of America. And it was a very tense situation. And when I started looking into it, I thought, well, imagine living through that. Imagine kind of thinking that might happen. But that's not enough as a story sometimes to have a big dramatic global event. Sometimes you actually need to make sure your characters have also got something to do. So is there a personal story there? Who are these people who are living through this week? What's going on for them? What's dramatic for them? So I started thinking about runaways and what you might find if you went out into your shed one night to get something and actually found something really, really unexpected in there. And that's actually how the story begins. So all these things came together, and I did quite a lot of research online. I read a lot of articles, and it's it's one of those things, actually, researching this book, where when you start to look into the history of the Cuban Missile Crisis, you realise that it was very, 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 very close to becoming an all-out war. But my characters, meanwhile, have their own situations to be dealing with. So we've got a main character who's a girl called Stevie, who has a best friend called Ray, who lives across the street. And they're a nice little pair. They get on very well, even though they're quite different. But life's quite boring, really. There's not an awful lot that goes on where they live. They just live in this little cul-de-sac, which is sort of based on the road that my grandparents used to live on, actually. And I've got in my head their house, which is Stevie's house. And then Stevie does go out to her coal shed one night just to get some coal for the boiler and finds someone in there. And it's this person's story and why she's there and what she's trying to achieve that really kind of drives the plot. So while all this kind of tension is going on in the world, and people don't know if there's going to be a war or not, and there's a lot of kind of fear, these three children also have their own story and their own fears and their own things they're trying to resolve. Now, there is a little bit of a crossover in this book to Letters from a Lighthouse, and this one as well, actually, which is why I brought them up at the start of my talk. Because there is a scene, I'm not going to give it too much away, but there is a scene later in the book where my characters visit the town where Letters from a Lighthouse is based. And the sequel story in this book, which is called Olive's Army, also introduces you to one of the characters who appears in this story as well. But having said that, you do not have to have read those books to enjoy this one. It's a completely standalone book, okay? There is just a little bit of a crossover with the characters, but it's all explained, it's all clear in this story. Okay, so I'm going to read you a little bit now, I think, and I think it probably makes sense if I read you the opening chapter, so you can get a feel for Stevie and you can see what happens. So the book is divided up into days because it takes place pretty much in 1 week. And the story begins on day 1. And we've got a newspaper headline that tells us what is going on in the news, because the news is quite a big part of the story as well. The fact that there's all these things happening. And Stevie is a newspaper delivery girl. I got that idea from my dad because he used to deliver newspapers when he was a boy. And they listen to the radio a lot, and Ray has got a television. Stevie hasn't, because her parents aren't quite as well off, but Ray has a television which they watch as well. So day 1, this is the newspaper headline: US President warns Cuba missiles could lead to war. And that's Tuesday the 23rd of October 1962. So this in reality was the first day that people in our country began to be aware that there was this issue going on in Cuba, and during the week that issue escalates and escalates. So this is what life's like at Stevie's house on that Tuesday night. It was after tea on a school night when I found the dead body. I'd gone out to the coal shed to fill up the bucket, which was as good an excuse as any to escape our kitchen for a moment's peace. Being a Tuesday, we'd just had pie and mash for tea. And being a day with a Y in it, my big sister Bev was arguing about why it wasn't her turn to do the dishes. Our terrier Flea, an excellent listener, was waiting patiently for any leftover pie. And all Mum did was turn the radio up louder. It was that new Beatles song again, the one that went, "Love, love me do," which, with the clatter of plates and the smell of mashed potato, was giving me a headache. Outside, the evening was inky black. The air had a bite of frost to it, and the only sounds were the distant hum of cars and next door's water gurgling down the drain. I stood for a moment enjoying how peaceful it was, not to hear Bev yakking on or the radio playing hit song after hit song, because Mum, who hated silence, had barely switched it off since Dad died. I went down the 2 steps to the shed and opened the door, only now switching on my torch. I was checking for spiders mostly, and certainly wasn't expecting anything else to appear in the torchlight. But it did. Something woolly and green. A bobble hat. I took a tiny step closer. My heart began to thunder. The hat was on a person's head. They were lying against the coal heap, facing the far wall. All I could see was the jut of a cheekbone, a coat collar turned up against the cold, a muddy hand that looked more like a freshly dug potato than anything human. The person wasn't moving. They were either very fast asleep or dead. I backed out of the shed faster than any spider could make me move. With the door shut and bolted, I caught my breath. Try to think. The sensible thing would be to go straight back inside and tell Mum, who'd rush round to our next door neighbours and ask to use their telephone to call the police. But I'd never seen a dead body before, and I was curious for a look, just quickly, just to be sure. Though I was far too scared to go back into that shed by myself, so I did the unsensible thing. I went across the street to my best friend Ray's. He'd never seen a dead body before either, and I knew he'd be up for it, given half a chance. It took Ray ages to come to the door. I started shivering by now, the shock I supposed, and excitement, and the cold because I'd come out without my coat. My finger hovered over the doorbell. Obviously Ray was in because the television was on, and I could hear his sister's annoying laugh through the glass. I was about to press the bell again when he opened the door. "At last!" I cried. "What's up?" Ray looked a bit put out, as if I was interrupting something. "You need to come with me, to mine, like now." I couldn't say any more when his family were in earshot, but I hoped he'd got the message. We lived on World's End Close, which was, without doubt, the dullest place on earth. A cul-de-sac of 14 pairs of identical square white houses with net curtains at the windows and box-hedged gardens at their fronts. The garden at number 2 didn't quite count, because no one had cut the grass there since old Mrs. Patterson moved out in June. But the point was, nothing ever happened round here. So seeing a dead body might well be the single most exciting and terrifying moment of mine and Ray's life. Ray glanced down. "What's with the coal bucket?" "What? Oh, I hadn't realised I was still carrying it." "Never mind that, can you—" "Ray!" His mum interrupted from the sitting room. "If that's Stevie, bring her inside." Unlike my family, Ray's used their sitting room every day, and from it came the sound of dramatic thumping music. They were lucky enough to have a television, and I often popped over to watch crime dramas and game shows and a bit of Blue Peter. "It's starting, Ray!" Mrs. Johnson called again. Ray's eyes flicked towards the sitting room. I'd lost his attention now, I could tell. "President Kennedy's about to be on," he said, beckoning me inside. I hesitated. We had a dead body to inspect. Couldn't the news wait? But Ray insisted. "It'll only be a few minutes." Defeated, I put down the bucket. A few minutes at Ray's wouldn't make much difference. The body would still be dead. Okay, right. So I'm going to leave it there. That's your little taster of the week at World's End. That's before they go and find out who or what is in their shed. Now, I'm going to end the session. Thank you for listening, by the way. It's quite nerve-wracking reading your book for the first time. And this is the first time I've read that, actually, to anyone. So what I would like you to do, I'm going to set you a little writing challenge now. I want you to think about the idea of finding something really, really unexpected in your own home. Now, the idea of finding something in a shed is not completely new. There's a really famous book by David Ullman called Skellig, which is about a boy who discovers a very odd man living in his garage. And the year this story is set, 1962, there was a very famous film that came out which is called Whistle Down the Wind, which is about some children who discover a man living in their barn on their farm, and the man tells them he's Jesus, and the children think that they have Jesus living in their barn until they realise that he's actually a runaway convict, a runaway prisoner. So those things were on my mind when I was writing this book. I realised, that I've been influenced by other people and other creators. So what I want to say, so that is a kind of almost like a type of story in a way, that story of like that idea of discovering something in your own home, which really, really kind of throws normal life into chaos. But what I want you to think about then is you find something. If you have a shed, then you by all means use your shed. So you go out there to get something like your bike or, to put some recycling out or something, and you find something in there which really shouldn't be there, preferably alive, actually. I think that's quite interesting if it can be something living. If you don't have a shed, think about where else outside your house you might find something like that, or inside. Maybe you've got a cupboard under the stairs, or maybe you've got an airing cupboard, or maybe you've got a wardrobe or something. And I want you to think about opening that, on a really normal day, you're doing something really normal, and suddenly you discover something living inside that cupboard, shed, whatever, that completely changes everything. Okay, so that's my writing challenge to you. And if you can think of a story around that, around what happens next, so, like I did there really with mine, you could maybe kind of start with the normal day, the normal things that are going on in your family home, and then you open the door on this living thing that really shouldn't be there, and what happens next. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed listening to me nattering on about the week at World's End, and I hope that you enjoy the writing challenge as well. We've done really well, actually. I've been talking for 17 minutes now, and we haven't been interrupted by my really, really needy dog. She's actually sat here as I'm talking, and you think, what's she leaning across doing? I'm trying to stroke her to shut her up because she's been whining all the way through me trying to do this. So she's actually kept quiet, which is great. So lovely to talk to you all, and happy writing, happy reading. Take care. Bye bye.